Bernie Sanders is back once again to defend Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid from the cuts that are almost certainly a-coming from the new GOP-led Congress. And this time he's bringing props. Let's watch.
May 7th, 2015, Donald Trump tweeted, quote, "I was the first and only potential GOP candidate to state there will be no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid." End of quote. On April 8th, 2015, Mr. Trump said, and I quote, "Every Republican wants to do a big number on Social Security." That's not Bernie Sanders talking. That is Donald Trump talking. "They want to do it on Medicare. They want to do it on Medicaid, and we can't do it. It's not fair to the people that have been paying in for years." End of quote.
Okay, so he starts that off there with a tweet from Donald Trump. He would have used like a video of Donald Trump, but Donald Trump only communicates through 140-character chunks,
Yes.
ending with an exclamation point. So that's the beginning, but what does he want Trump to actually do now that those programs, which are incredibly popular and are absolutely necessary to prop up a lot of the most vulnerable people in America, are under threat of being cut? Let's see.
Well, it seems to me that Mr. Trump right now has got to do one of two things. Number one, if all that he was talking about was campaign rhetoric, then what he was obliged to do now is to tell the American people I was lying. Yeah, I said that I would not support cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, but I was lying. It was a campaign ruse. I just said what came to my mind to get votes. I had no intention of keeping my word. And if that's what he believes, if that's what the case was, let him come forward and say that. But if that is not what the case is, if he was sincere, then I would hope that tomorrow or maybe today he could send out a tweet and tell his Republican colleagues to stop wasting their time and all of our time. And for Mr. Trump to tell the American people that he will veto any proposal that cuts Medicare, that cuts Medicaid, and that cuts Social Security. And what we are talking about right now, let us be clear, no debate, that is exactly what this goal is. That's what this budget proposal is.
I always wonder where they go to print out these props. Like, do they go to the local Kinko's to do it?
Kinko's,
yeah, which is awesome, because if you're the Kinko's associate who's helping Bernie Sanders, it must be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Unless you don't agree with his politics.
The guy who had to carry that through the House chambers or whatever said that Ted Cruz walked by him, looked at it, and just chuckled.
That's really funny. I like that second video because Bernie outlined, the one of two options that Trump has. But in reality, we know how things work for Trump. He doesn't actually have to do either one of those things. He doesn't have to admit that he lied, and he also can go ahead and support cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And look, I think there will be political ramifications to doing that, because there are certain members of the electorate that did confuse someone like Donald Trump as someone who's similar to Bernie Sanders, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, they're very different because Bernie Sanders is genuine when it comes to these issues. Donald Trump represented himself as an anti-establishment candidate, but we now know, and we knew during the election, to be honest with you, that he's very pro-establishment. I mean, look at his cabinet picks, right? So who knows how this is all going to go down, but I'm very curious to see what the reaction to the electorate would be should Republicans do away with these, programs that they actually love and support.
Yeah, and they could potentially get damaged quite a bit. I mean, those are popular programs, and they're not just popular amongst big libs or Democratic voters. Republicans love them too. And they especially love them when they actually acknowledge that they're receiving money from those funds. Some Republicans seem to think that it's different for them and other people, or if they're taking welfare, then it's fine for them but bad for other people. So that's entirely possible. Obviously, I'm glad to see Bernie Sanders doing this and doing what's necessary to get some of the media to pay attention to it. I like the idea, at least, that with the election over, he's not fading back into the darkness. He's continuing to campaign against Donald Trump.
I think that it's so incredibly important for someone like Bernie Sanders to hold Donald Trump's feet to the fire, to hold members of Congress accountable for their actions. And look, it's not because I disagree with Republicans. I do, but I also have a huge problem with Democrats. Democrats right now are fundamentally weak. They tuck tail. They allow Republicans to strip them of their power. They allow Republicans to do pretty much whatever they want. They'll concede because they're weak and because they have the same corporate interests behind the scenes that are playing a huge role. And so seeing someone like Bernie Sanders be as vocal and outspoken as he has been so far is relieving, right? Yeah. We'll see how it goes, though. We'll see how much of an impact it has. But Bernie Sanders, Senator Warren, I feel like those are the few key players that we can rely on to actually do good things in Congress.
Well, look, my prediction is that Trump will not do either of those two things that Bernie Sanders asked him to do. Hopefully, Bernie Sanders will continue to press him to do one of those two. I think what he'll do is what he always does, despite the fact that he has this unearned reputation as being a straight talker and an alpha male. He's going to barrage us over the course of the next few months, however long it takes until they decide to cut it or not, with a bunch of mushy, garbled, vague nonsense that can be interpreted as being pro-Social Security or against Social Security, for cuts, against cuts. And if they end up cutting it, he'll have enough in his tweets that'll make it look like, oh, I was trying to get them not to do it, but what am I going to do? The party went for it. And if in the end there's enough popular activism and opposition that they stop the cuts from going through, then he'll be able to point to one of his 10,000 tweets from the past month to say, oh, well, look, he was kind of against it then. And CNN will give him a ton of credit as if he was against the cuts in the first place.
I mean,
that's the thing with his just barraging us with diarrheal tweets all day long.
I think you're right. And he gets away with a lot of things. I mean, think about the fact that he was supposed to hold a press conference regarding potential conflicts of interest during his presidency. He was supposed to hold that press conference weeks ago in December. And he just decided to cancel it. And now, he's saying that he'll have this press conference later on this month, but who knows what he's going to do? I mean, he was able to just get away with canceling what I would argue is an incredibly important press conference where he's going to tell the American people what he plans to do with his businesses while he is, the commander-in-chief of the United States. Yeah. And so he seems to get away with everything. And my prediction is that he will continue to get away with everything until Americans start really feeling the impact of what his presidency is going to be like. Yeah. Once they see that the programs that they love so much are getting attacked by the GOP. Once they notice that, hey, the president that you keep pointing to as the individual who's divided our country is actually not the person who divided the country. It's the type of rhetoric that you hear from someone like Donald Trump. We'll see what happens, right? I have hope that Americans are a little smarter than what we've experienced during the election.
We'll see. We'll see. I'm glad you brought up the canceled meeting, though. I mean, that just happened on Friday. He announced, I know things about whether there was hacking or not that nobody in the intelligence community knows, which is laughable, and I'll reveal it in a press conference on Wednesday. Didn't happen.
Exactly.
I trust him. I believe him at his word. He knows something no one else in the intelligence community knows. And yet, no press conference. It's weird.
Think about all of the things that President Obama was rightfully criticized for, issues involving transparency, right? Not transparent enough. He campaigned on more transparency, wasn't transparent enough. Now look at this guy, right? Donald Trump won't even hold a press conference. He only communicates to the press through Twitter, through 140.
He has an active Snapchat, to be fair.
Does he really?
No, he doesn't.
Oh, okay. I was like, I don't even know about that, and I have no interest in that.
Hopefully with Bernie Sanders, they can stop these cuts from happening. I mean, we were worried throughout Obama's 2 terms that he would okay cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Thankfully, we got through those years without that happening. But even if it's stopped now, you cannot rest on your laurels. You have to be vigilant as long as he's in office. Because as soon as they pass their absolutely massive tax cuts, that is going to devastate the federal budget, and there's going to be continuing, growing pressure to cut every progressive priority and sacred cow you can imagine. So no matter what happens, even if we stop him right now, you cannot relax. The fight has to continue.